Do we want to do D, Tara, in the order of our presentations? D, Tara, you, me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, ready?
Ready.
Here we go. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, welcome.
So happy to have you all here.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to let folks in. That sound good to the team before we begin?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Lache.
Hi. I was just about to like chat. It's nice to see you, Tara, in person as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Hey, should we start intros?
Sure.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. I am D'Angela Cooks. I am founder and president of Voice and Vision. I've been doing a lot of work my entire life, but I used to be a minister, stand-up comic in Hollywood for a while. I don't do either one of those and anymore. I'm also a marriage and family therapist, and I brought all those skill sets to my company. And been doing DEI work officially for about 12 years. So I'll pass it on over to Tara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Phillips. I am currently the executive director of an organization called La Maison Baldwin. I am based in Paris and have a 30-year-long career doing nonprofit organizational development and executive leadership. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and moved to Paris in 2018. And so I focus my attention on consulting organizations that need organizational development support, including DEI. And then I also run an organization that honors the life and legacy of James Baldwin by supporting Black writers through conferences and residencies. So that's me. It's a lot of stuff. And I'm a writer too. So I will pass it on to Angela, I guess.
Hi, folks. I'm Dr. Angela Irvine, and I am the founder and principal researcher for Series Policy Research. And we are community researchers who are really grounded in efforts to achieve liberation. And I'm sharing my experience as somebody who has been co-developing an organization to decenter white leadership. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that. And I'll pass it to Aisha.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aisha Canfield. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a director at Series Policy Research. I've been a community researcher for about 13 years. I also work on systems change primarily with juvenile probation departments to bolster their data collection processes so that they can have a better understanding of the multiple layers of young people that are coming into the departments. And I also work as a program evaluator for community-based organizations, setting up measures of success so that they can promote themselves as viable and successful alternatives to traditional system interventions. So I'm so happy to be with all of you today. And Angela and I are based in Portugal.
Yes. And Tara's based in Paris, France. All right. And I'm based in San Leandro. All right. So there we have it. I think we should begin. So welcome for the new folks who are just joining us. We're really excited to bring this to you all. Series Policy Research and Voice and Vision. Also, shout out to Crystal for running the tech. Thank you, Crystal, on the back end for helping us out with this. Appreciate it. Yeah, so we were just, just talking about, Voice and Vision and series about the future of DEI, where it is, what are some gaps and what are some things we want to see moving forward. So before I created Voice and Vision last year, I was running an international anti-racism firm called Momentum Collaborative, which is where we pulled on Tara. That's how we started working together. And we already had the infrastructure in place when 2020 hit, right? When America was like, oh my God, we're racist, right? We already had the infrastructure in place, but we were not prepared for the onslaught of clients that were coming our way. Okay, so we had clients from everywhere calling us. I mean, we had folks like, who was it? It was Mercedes-Benz in Germany. Leadership was predominantly all, it was all German cisgender men. And then we had like United Nations in Nairobi contacted us. And I'm like, what can we tell the United Nations, right? It was a lot of people. We had Fox Television contacted us, all this stuff. And so, we had so much influx of clientele that I think that we didn't get to really capture some of the gems that we were noticing and experiencing. And so we're going to go to the next slide, Crystal, where we're going to talk about gems and trends, right? And so the gems are the things, the insights that we learned in this work, and the trends are like the patterns that we also noticed. So one thing that we realized was that success looks so different in DEI. I mean, it looks so different, right? So traditionally, we see success in the workplace as a promotion, retention, a salary bump, a change in title. And in this, it could look so much different. It could look like an employee finally realizing and accepting that their organization isn't equipped nor interested to take necessary steps to really retain them and support them. And so one example I have of that is where we had a client who was pretty high up in the C-suite. And she was queer, she was Latina, had been at the organization for about 20 years. And none of them ever knew she was queer, and she doesn't have to share that. But when we came in, with me being Black, queer, all these things, she kind of got emboldened to share that part of her. So she shared that. And then 6 months later, she's like, you know what? Also, I think I'm going to resign. And making about $300,000 a year, she resigned and said, not only am I not going to resign and get a new job, I want some respite, right? I want some respite. And what she did was that she resorted to creating and writing her cookbook that really covered all of her people's cuisines from her home place. So for me, that was success, right? And that looks different. And so shout out to her. We always hang out. And so she's doing really well now. And there's a lot of other ways of different, I would say, ideas of success in this work that we can share, but we only have a couple of minutes. So the next piece is generational gaps. Generational gaps are so important, and they are really, really it's glaring when you get into organizations. And so I learned this title or this acronym called MCM, not Man Crush Mondays, but Multicultural Millennials, right? Where it's younger employees who are in organizations who are on fire. They know all the DEI terms. They know the attribution. They know the theory behind it, and they know the historical context that led to it. Right. And oftentimes I would see these young folks really hold leadership's feet to the fire in very public platforms in ways that made some of the senior employees uncomfortable. Right. And they didn't feel supported by their senior employees. Right. Which wasn't all the way true, but that's what it felt like to them. And on the opposite end, we have some, and not all, the senior employees who felt like they were being annoyed and agitated by the younger folks because they're like, you're taking up company time with your personal grievances, right? I've had folks come to me and say, you know what, they think this is bad. Back in the 70s, ... right? And a lot of them did not want to bring their quote unquote whole selves to work, right? They wanted to keep it separate, which is totally fine. And so there were so many gems on both sides that I thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be beautiful if we can just capture all this wisdom that we are receiving and be able to like bring it together and help it inform recommendations going forward, right? So this was something also that I thought was a really good insight, and I wanted to capture this piece. All right. So the next one here, we have trends around national backlash. I'm pretty sure you all have heard about the national backlash. I've seen it since 2023. 65 anti-DEI bills have been introduced, and the number is growing, by the way, and 8 have passed. And so the thing about it is that, again, in 2020, we saw an uptick in race-based conversations and consciousness. And anytime you have a revolution, the pendulum always swings, right? There are people who are always going to resist, always, always. And so now what's happening is that anti-DEI folks are calling DEI unconstitutional, right? And it's fostering white guilt. Okay, so that is like the premise of the anti-DEI work. And so you'll see in states recently like Florida, Texas, and Utah are the latest to ban a lot of DEI efforts, in particular around higher education and public offices. So for those folks who are already on the fence or who never committed to DEI, this is the perfect cover, right, for them. We have legislation backing you. So we've been seeing this national backlash for a little while. The next piece here is defunded position. So when 2020 hit again, 2021 is when we saw like a lot of robust hiring of DEI departments and leads. And it was a lot of excitement to increase, employee satisfaction and representation on these teams. People were so happy, and they would call us and be like, oh my God, we hired 5 folks who are this age, 5, they were like, it was really serious. And so the thing is that when they got in, people were really loving it. They were really excited. And then it swung. The pendulum always swings, right? So then the staff started providing, or start sharing concerns and issues with the DEI leads of the departments, right? And then the problem was that these DEI positions, it was great in theory, but they weren't given any real agency, right, to really make a real difference. And so they were stuck in between a rock and a hard place. They had to hold all of this stuff, these concerns, but tell their boss, the ED or the executive director, sorry, the ED or the CEO, about all of the issues. And so therefore they became the bearer of bad news. And what we call this phenomenon is where you become, you go from a pet to a threat, right? So pet to threat. And then we realized, they're starting to have coded language to try to start defunding positions. They would say, you know what? I need to see more return on your investment, right? And so they were saying, you're not really showing the measurements of how this is being successful, because once again, success in this work looks different for people. Okay, we're going to the next slide, Crystal. All right. And so the last piece here is I don't want to, end on a low note, because there are some successes here, and there's a lot more than this too. I think the fact that people are resisting it shows you that the work is working, right? If they weren't resisting it, we're not doing the work right. So some companies are staying the course by maintaining and increasing their DEI efforts. Some have increased it by 50% even. So some examples would be Victoria's Secrets, NASA, they've increased theirs by 50% as of recent. And also Michaels. I love Michaels. I haven't been there a long time, but now I want to go just to support what they're doing. Okay. The next success is around equity. Equity often is the most difficult and the most challenging for people to really wrap their heads around, particularly for those in power. Excuse me. So equity presented the greatest challenge, yet it is also where we observe the most significant impact. And so I always talk about equity in this way. So there's an inclusion strategist. Her name is Dr. Verna Myers. And she was the previous VP of inclusion strategy at Netflix, and DEI pioneering all the things. And she had a quote that I loved, and it says, diversity is being asked to the party, whereas inclusion is being invited to dance. Right. For me, I took it a step further and said inequity is helping plan the party. Right. You plan where the party's at, what music is playing, what the food is going to be like, all those things. Okay. And equity is really difficult for those in power because it requires them to power share. Right. Like have a pay transparency policy, have employee resource groups that have agency. So it really is the most difficult for organizations to embody. And so with all this, our efforts really underscore the necessity for a hybrid approach, right? So combining DEI initiatives with community research was something that I thought, if we can bridge these two worlds, how beautiful would this be? So, with my DEI work, it's not just DEI work, I have a clinical lens on it because I see it as collective trauma, but impacting people differentially. So when I pivoted to Voice and Vision, the company that I'm running now, I wanted to rethink, I wanted to reimagine and recreate, like, how do we do this work in a way that feels right and feels relevant to me and to the people that we're working with. So thank you all, and I'm gonna pass it on over to Tara.
All right, I was muted. My apologies. So when I started doing DEI work, I mean, sometimes when you become a DEI practitioner, it's often by accident. It's because you're one of few faces of color in certain environments. And so there's this default idea that you are an expert just because of life experience. But throughout the years, I started to think more about just the human dynamics in organizations and how they butt up against the institutional reality that we all face. I mean, part of the reason why there's backlash when we do this work is because the institutions and the system were never designed to accommodate diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so when often people say, oh, well, the system is broken, it's like, no, the system is actually operating exactly as it was supposed to. And that how we're experiencing, whether we call it institutional or systemic racism or oppression, whether we call it white supremacy characteristics and culture, like whatever we label it, that system was designed intentionally to leave people out and to assign power to a very specific and distinct group of people. So when I think about this work in terms of like, what is it that we're really trying to do? We're really trying to redesign the institutions that we are a part of, whether it's an organization, a business, or the government or economic systems. All of those things require a redesign, and that's heavy work for sure. And now that I'm immersed in James Baldwin's legacy, I hear his words all the time. I'm reading his words all the time. I always land on this one particular quote that is one of his like most enduring, and it's this idea that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So in doing this work, there has to be an acceptance that it's cyclical, that it's there is no real finish line. But if we don't face the reality that that this system was designed a certain way, we'll never be able to change it. So in doing this work, I outlined 3 key assumptions, and the first one I mentioned around, like, we have to get to a place of acceptance that this is what the system was designed to do in terms of to exclude, to not be diverse, and to not have equity. And that backlash that Dee spoke to is obviously a response from those who benefit from this design system. And, you know, it's just human nature. Like, it's just human nature to not want to surrender the power that you might have or the advantage that you might have in a system that's created to disadvantage some and advantage others. And you know, it's just, I think if we can step back and look at it in terms of, you know, what are the value systems that are undergirding these types of behaviors, then we can address them and attack them in a different way. But the other, like, really important thing is, and what's tied to that idea is that, you know, in the context of DEI, and a lot of the reasons why so much of this work often starts and then stops, is that organizations, leaders, they always want to start on the institutional level. They always want to start at the place of policy and practice, without regard to the fact that the people in the organization, in the institution, are the ones that are, you know, feeding and are the organic kind of material in the system, in the organization. And so if we don't tend to the individuals and the different ways in which they interact and how that creates culture and behavior, will never, policies and practice seldom work in a sustained way. So with that in mind, and over the years, I've created and refined a framework. We can move to the next slide, Crystal, that addresses this truth, right? That if we really want to see, and this is, I would say this is more of a change framework than a DEI framework, but I wanted to just label it DEI for this conversation, that when we do this work, we really do have to start with the self, right? And this idea of, like, who am I when I show up in my organization, in my office, in my business, that is part of what I'm bringing to the table and also part of what I'm reacting to. And so a lot of the work that I've done has been around just breaking down personal narrative, and not in a, you know, warm, fuzzy type of way, but just allowing folks to be real about their story and how they ended up in an organization. Why does the organization align to their personal values? What are the strengths that they bring to the organization? What are our preferences as individuals when we approach change generally? Because oftentimes we have different preferences in how we approach change, and that's where conflict comes up. And so because of that, after really digging into the self and just our stories and, you know, how we're showing up, connecting to others becomes the next important component. How do we deal interpersonally with one another? How do we have affinity with each other? How do we deal with conflict with each other? And most importantly, how does the organization deal with conflict collectively? Because if there isn't an acceptance that conflict is okay, and it's really about, you know, the clash of ideas and not personal, then it's very hard to really get to the core of the interpersonal relationships that can drive this work forward. And then, you know, from dealing with, you know, interpersonal, then you move into thinking about the culture. What are the values? What are the behaviors? What are the norms that exist in the organization that may be undermining diversity, inclusion, and equity? And it's at that point that redesigning can happen. It's at that point when you can operationalize the goals and vision that you have with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion work, and lay in the policies and processes and practices. And those things they should be built on this foundation of individuals buying in, because they've had their own reflection and their own ability to examine the human dynamics first before the policy in that. And the last two pieces of the framework are more about just ensuring the accountability that what you put in place, there's measures in order to sustain it. And leaving a legacy is really about how does an organization tie its diversity, equity, inclusion work to this higher idea of social justice, right? And what I always tell clients, once they've stepped into this arena of DEI work, they are now DEI practitioners, that like, this isn't just a one-off, this isn't just an HR thing, this isn't just, a Band-Aid for an issue or a crisis that comes up. This is work that is really about a larger social justice mission. It's ongoing, and it's essential to strong organizational development. Like, strong organizational development is strong DEI, and strong DEI is strong organizational development. They're integrated, they're not separate. And one thing I just point out, you see in this box, this backward arrow, oftentimes, when we start to change the institution, there is a regression in terms, and not a regression in a bad way, but we're often forced to reconfront our own personal issues or stories or concerns around how things are changing. And I remember I used to use this example a long time ago when I was living in California, and there were propositions put in place that were meant to alienate immigrants to certain communities, to the state. And I remember the narrative that was always being told was, particularly to Black people, it was like, well, they're coming and taking your jobs. And that sort of policy language, for lack of a better term, institutional language, was triggering for people individually. Like, is that true? And starting to like revisit our own biases, our own perspectives, those types of things. So sometimes it's important to always create, not sometimes, all the time, it's always important to create space for individuals to re-examine how they're progressing and reacting to institutional change that happens in your organizations. So that's it for me, in terms of the work and the approach to the work. And I think it's time for Aisha.
Thanks, Sarah.
Sure.
So
I can only see myself, so I'm like, I don't.
I see you go now. It's me. Thank you.
Okay,
So
okay, great.
what we talk about a lot is, how do we know if this work is successful? And this has been one of the shortcomings around folks doing DEI work. We know that in 2020 and 2021, we saw a lot of major companies and corporations playing this sort of numbers game, right? That we will increase leadership with folks from a particular background by this percent. We will hire, a percentage of our employees from this particular background. And it really became a numbers game that folks jumped on really, really quickly, and were sort of rushing to the finish line. And I think that defining success should be quantifiable. I think that that's really important. People are compelled by numbers. We live in a capitalist society where numbers, we're really reliant on numbers. But I think that the quality of the experience of this transformation is also incredibly important. And when there's attrition or the numbers change, what will remain is, what was the experience for folks, and how did we experience this change and this process as we were becoming a new organization, as we were embarking on this journey of redefining what our identity is going to be, both internally and public facing. And so if you came to the webinar to hear this is how exactly you're going to measure success, I'm sorry that's not going to happen today. But there's a point to that, right? And I want to go through some of these key assumptions. I really like Dee's language around gems, some gems that we've developed over the time, or that we've gathered over time as we've helped organizations and agencies go through their own transformation. And so the first one, don't compare. Each organization needs to define success for itself. We know that trends are the antithesis of longevity, and that they can lead to burnout. And while often well-intentioned, folks see their peers, their professional peers doing something, and they want to also do it. We know that it can be detrimental to the success of organizations to jump on those kind of bandwagons. We want transformation over competition. And it's important to remember that organizations and agencies and companies, they are unique, right? And even those doing similar work or in similar fields have unique workplace dynamics, have unique needs, have unique cultures. And so it's really better to get clear on what one's own success looks like, given the respective climate and culture of your organization or of your agency. And take stock, right? Take stock of what the dynamics are, what your current climate is, and develop measures of success at the onset once you've taken stock of that climate. So, you know, a friend's company or a competitive company might be doing this, and it can feel really compelling to want to make sure that you are sort of keeping up with the direction that you think things are moving in, but that's not necessarily going to set you up for success long term. And then dreaming together. So success can't solely reflect the vision or imagination of top decision makers. And so one of the failures of organizational change is when that change is solely a reflection of the desires of those in power. It just sort of reifies what already is, and it strengthens the status quo of a process where only the top decision makers are setting the tone and the vision of that organization. And furthermore, I think it's really important that those at every level of the organization have the time, space, and support and resources to imagine what a more equitable organization would look like, rather than having someone else's imagination superimposed on them with the expectation that now they are in charge to implement the higher up sort of vision of the organization. And so we know that folks who have time, who are well-resourced, also get to dream. And in this sense, we believe that dreaming together is a key component to power sharing and therefore later achieving equity. And then give it time, successes may not be noticeable right away. I think this sort of speaks for itself, but it's worth reminding us that in a time where we are conditioned to measure success by instant gratification, where if we don't see the fruit of our efforts within a year or so, then we've deemed it a failure, we stop funding it, we stop pursuing it, we stop hiring for it. And I think oftentimes our work, the impact becomes clear further down the line, and not even necessarily for our generation. You know, hindsight is everything, retrospect is really important. But I also think this is where setting up an infrastructure that we can capture those successes long term is going to be really, really important when you need to make the claim for longevity of our efforts. And then keep an open mind. And I think Tara spoke to this a little bit, but conflict and storming are also signs of impending success. So confronting equity and diversity issues is going to come at the cost of the comfort of people who benefited from the status quo. And it may mean that tensions arise. It may mean people quitting, like Dee mentioned. It may mean a shaking up from the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom. And I think that these should be interpreted as necessary movement and identity formation, which can feel like, as Tara mentioned, a regression back to sort of this storming phase, this identity formation that is really similar to when you're starting an organization. You're trying to figure out who you are and what you do and how you want to do it. Crystal, you can go to the next slide. And so an approach to even establishing a process for identifying what successes could look like should start with finding a North Star. I think we spend a lot of time talking about what we don't want to see, what we need to be doing better, and those are really, really important. But again, going back to that idea that dreaming as power sharing, I think it's important to tap in as a staff, as an organization, and give everybody the time and space to provide input, to say what their North Star would look like, given their respective layers of identity, their respective positions. What is it in a dream world, in a better world? What would this organization look like? How would it move? Who would they be working with? Really allow folks to sort of do that co-dreaming and start in a place that's strength-based. Carving the path to your North Stars through identifying short, mid, and long-term outcomes. I think this process can feel messy, and it is messy, and it can feel out of control for many people. And so I think developing, whether it's a visual, like through a logic model, where folks can see if we do this in the next year, and this in the next 5 years, and this in the next 10 years, the efforts that we are making, right, it serves as a container, as carving that path to getting us to that said measure, that said dream, that said North Star, in a way that I think feels tangible and provides purpose when things start to feel out of control. And then developing a mixed methods evaluation to create opportunities for improvement, rest, and celebration, right? So once you've developed your North Star, once you've created those markers of success, short, mid, and long term, how do we know if we're on the path, and how do we know that this is the path that we should continue on? And I think that developing a mixed methods evaluation process is going to be really, really important. Again, mixed methods, because we know that numbers compel, numbers provide funding, numbers often provide buy-in, but numbers can be short-sighted, as I've mentioned, and I think adding a layer of qualitative data is going to provide that texture, is going to provide that nuance, will give you some data as to the experience that people are having as you're embarking on these DEI efforts, that will ensure that you can continue to keep your staff motivated and that you're headed in the right direction. And I say not just opportunities for improvement, but also rest. Because I think, again, we are socialized to jump on the next trend, to chase after the next crisis, to be in fix-it mode. And there are times I think that what we're doing is successful, and we're getting feedback through our evaluations that we are on the right path. So I think mixed methods evaluations can also provide time for rest and respite, which is going to be key, particularly after that storming phase. And celebration. Dee and I talked about celebrating joy and finding joy in this work, and finding small wins and pausing for those wins. And I think that that is going to be really important to prevent burnout. And then the process of co-developing, one last one, Crystal, if you could go back. The process of co-developing a system to address conflicts creates another opportunity to redesign equity. And so, you know, conflict is going to come about as you embark on this transformative work and this transformative process. And I think Dee mentioned from pet to threat, who becomes then the focus of why that conflict has occurred, how that gets handled, says a lot about how much work needs to be done within an organization. And so not just thinking about intentionally that co-dreaming and setting up measures of success, but also thinking about when conflict occurs, how are we going to handle it in a way that is equitable, that people feel safe, is also going to be key to ensuring the health and the well-being, not just of the folks involved of the process, not just for the organization or the agency itself, but also this DEI work, right? If folks feel like if I speak up, if I am honest, if I am forthcoming about some of the challenges or some learning edges that we have, and they start to step back from the process, you're recreating a power dynamic where only the folks who are safe to speak up will, only the folks who are safe to dream will, right? And the folks who are susceptible to all of the things we're trying to undo through our DEI work will fall back and we'll be back at square one. So I think, again, the quality of the process is just as important as the quality of the goals and the outcomes that you're trying to establish. And so with that said, I will send it over to Angela.
Thanks, everybody. So far, what a great set of slides and insights so far. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to speak a little bit about how to develop measures that go beyond optics. And so, you know, we really want to encourage organizations to think beyond hiring, promotion, and retention goals. Not that these are not important, right? I mean, there are many organizations that do not hit reasonable hiring goals, let alone promotion and retention, and how you even achieve those goals. But in the spirit of what we've been talking about today, going back to Tara's ideas about how do you redesign an organization, For equity, Dee's metaphor of equity is everybody planning the party together. To really, really effectively measure whether or not we're doing this work, we have to develop other types of measures. And so I'm going to talk about 3 examples. The first being effective power sharing. At Ceres, I'm going to use us as an example. While I'm the founder and principal researcher, we have a cooperative decision-making structure so that the 2 directors, Aisha and Kirby, the 3 of us make all of the financial, intellectual, programmatic decisions together, including whether or not to have me continue as the primary financial, the person with primary financial burden, right? So that was a collective decision because we still have COVID debt. And so as a white woman, I'm continuing to hold the burden of that debt while having Aisha and Kirby share in everything else. We need to develop measures and assessments that can capture that breadth of power sharing. Organizations need an infrastructure, and I think intentionally, to build generational wealth for those who don't have generational wealth. Money is important, salaries are important, really, really clear salary ladders are important, but also I think in the context of time being valuable, time with family being valuable. At Ceres, when we get to the point of giving raises, we always give people the option of taking financial raises, but also being paid for the same, for less time, right? So buying yourself out of a half of a day or a full day each week. And this really allows, I think the opportunity to live our values, that family is more important than work, and that our health is more important than work. So again, within assessments moving forward, we really want to think about not just is everybody given equal opportunity to make more money, but is everybody across the organization able to give input on how people are resourced for their time. And then finally, people need to believe that their ideas are valued, and those with lived experience are experts. And I think that it gets particularly difficult when you have a policy-based organization where, I think in a community where, in a world with white supremacy, but we have to live our values again, and we have to be able to be organizations that take bold statements, that innovate in practice. And so are those in power willing to release reports, to make statements that go against your own financial interests? I think is one other aspect, one other measure that we need to quantify. And so, it's all of these sort of difficult, juicier qualitative measures, I think, that we need to start incorporating into DEI success assessments. And we can do this. Ceres has long experience finding really difficult qualitative measures and quantifying them and measuring them. And so that's all I have today. We're going to move on and open this up for anybody who might have questions about any of the content so far. And then we're going to have a breakout session after that. Does anybody have any questions for us? You can just speak out if you want, or raise your hand.
I have a question.
Great.
Thank you for all this great information. I appreciate just your guys' time. So I am part of an agency, and we have created charters, and then we also have work groups. We're in the midst of reevaluating our framework and really measuring really setting up something that we can measure how we are doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are kind of developing questionnaires to see where we are in the continuum in this work. It is a voluntary, a lot of our teammates are not engaged with the process yet, but we're hopeful that we could be able to get them all more engaged. And so what would be the first step in really establishing our identity? I think that really speaks to kind of like, if we are not an agreement about how this should look like, what is like the one step that we should be considering? So we're not ruling out people or anything like that, but really having a common ground in what is the most important. And what we need to do, like action steps, if that makes sense.
Aisha, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah. So I think that it takes a lot of time to get into an agreement. And so I think people think, well, if we haven't reached an agreement in 3, 6, 9 months, then we're just not in agreement. And we have worked with collaboratives with organizations before where we had to develop a shared common language that that the organizations who do very different work with very different approaches, with very different populations, could come to and use as sort of an elevator pitch around their identity and what they do as a collaborative, and then use that to develop tools that they could measure their success against. And this took a really long time. And Angela, you probably remember, I think this took at least a year, if not more, of us staying in communication, staying in community, and going through the process of sort of really drilling down with each. I don't want to say drilling down, because I feel like it was actually building up around what each organization does and what its strengths are, and how do we combine those to create a language around a vision. And so going back to my slide around developing a North Star, I think that we live in a world where we think that there's only room for so many ideas and so many visions. And then we're sort of crabs in a barrel and deciding like who gets chosen, right? So I would say that go back to sort of this idea around co-dreaming and developing a North Star, even if it starts with too many ideas, too much language, right? And giving people time to sit with it and process it, and have someone potentially come in and help facilitate this process that feels invested but not biased, is going to be really key. But I would say that don't think just because it's been 6 months to a year or however long that you don't have an agreement. You haven't reached an agreement yet. And so, Angela, I don't know if you want to add something.
I just think that it's really hard to move into the data collection phase until you have a shared agreement on what your measures are. And I think to get those measures, you really have to have the North Star. And what we've learned is that having that North Star really allows you to back in and for people to understand why each of the long-term, midterm, and short-term measures are there. And so, we can talk to you more about this offline, but yeah, I just think that with every single research project, with every single data collection process we ever do, we have this really difficult sort of, these and juicy, right? They're good and difficult conversations about, well, why do we, what are we aiming for, and how do we measure that?
And if I could just add one more thing, I think sometimes that it's important to remember that we can stagger. Identities can be unfolding, right? And so folks might have a certain idea and other folks might have another idea. And maybe some of those ideas around who you're going to be as an organization doesn't happen in the first 5 years, but it's a longer term goal. And so let's create a visual. Let's go through the process of creating a visual where people can contribute who they want the agency to be. And let's lay those out in a timeline so that everybody sees their contributions on the page, right? As part of where the organization is headed. But let's also look at resources. What do we need, whether it's staffing or financial or whatever it might be. And let's say, yes, all 10 ideas are possible and doable, but it's really important, given what we have now, that we do some forecasting, right? So maybe 5 ideas can happen in the next 5 years, but those other 5 ideas that folks have around who we want to be as an organization will happen, 10 years out, right? And so again, there's not a race to the finish line. Identity formation happens in stages and phases, and it's really important that you be able to process those out, and also so you don't have burnout. But that way, also everyone can see their contribution as being valid, valuable, and to know that it is coming, right?
Can I ask a follow-up question? Do you guys, in your professional opinion, can DEI work sustain in a environment that only a percentage of folks are invested in the work? Can this be sustainable if it is like volunteer instead of an invested commitment for everybody?
Oh, Dee, do you want to answer that?
I see Tara laughing. I want Tara to hop in real quick.
You're like, you want me to answer? I mean, here's the thing, and this is where there has to be a balance in terms of who's owning the work, right? Like, we definitely want to stay away from only leadership and decision makers deciding how this work is done. But at the same time, there's a reality of hierarchy and function, right? And so if you don't have a C-suite or a senior leadership team or whoever they are driving this work, like wholeheartedly, like they've taken a stance that this is important, it is a lot harder to accomplish what you're, or to form a new identity if that isn't there. Now, in some cases, those people fall off, but that's often not typical. And so what I often suggest is, because typically, what comes out of it is like there's a committee, and and the committee starts doing the work, and there's that structure that happens. I think it's really important, some like very tactical things, is that there's a clear partnership agreement between the volunteers, the committee, and the leadership team, so that there's clear expectations at who has what power and how they're engaging with the rest of the organization. There is a way to operationalize this work. Just as Aisha and Angela spoke to having a North Star, from a functional standpoint of view or an operational standpoint of view, you can create what is like your rallying cry for like for 3 months. And that rallying cry will define certain objectives that are necessary. So maybe the rallying cry is like, transparency with the salary scale. I'm being very sort of generic, but that's gonna include and mandate certain departments, whether they like it or not, right? Like HR is gonna have to play a role. Finance is gonna have to play a role. And so that way, and this goes back to my point around like DEI is not this thing over here. It's integrated in the organization. And so when it's integrated in the organization, everyone's going to have some ownership merely by nature of the function of their job, even if their heart and minds may not have evolved yet to the value of it. So like usually what I'll do with clients is we build out a template of like, okay, what's the rallying cry this month? What are the objectives? Who are the functional departments that have responsibilities? And then we'll make a project plan, and that's monitored, in terms of deliverables. So, I mean, it's a uphill battle when not everybody's bought in, but there is a way to get things to move the culture in the organization.
Yeah. I'll hop in there too, is, in particular, I think like investment is so critical. And I know that in leadership investment is super important, because they drive a lot of the policies and practices, And so I know that when we would do our consultation calls with people, one of the first few questions we would ask is leadership bought in, right? Because if they weren't, that means we have different work to do. Right. And so for us, Tara mentioned operationalizing. The thing with us capturing data is that it's going to help us really operationalize this work in a different way, so that when you operationalize, it doesn't matter who's invested or not, because it's a part of the culture now, and if you're not invested, then you have a choice to make. Right. And so I think that's how we're looking at it, as it being like the water that all of us swim in. This work. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Sandra.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I took some notes.
Thank you.
you.
Really appreciate it. So we're going to actually take this as an opportunity to shift into some breakout groups. And so, Crystal, do you mind going to the next slide? So we're going to split you all into 8 different groups, and we're going to give you about 20 minutes to have you discuss what would you like to see DEI become moving forward, and how would you like to see that success measured. And so again, we're going to send you off into groups for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have you come back and report back. So if each group could choose one reporter, that would be great. And so, Crystal, are you ready to send people out?
Yes.
Okay, so remember, what would you like to see DEI become as we move forward, and how would you like to see success measured? And I'll type it into the comments to each group too, so you can remember. But we will see you all in about 20 minutes. Thank you.
Are we joining groups too or no?
I'm
No,
not going
I
to.
just couldn't leave you
Oh.
out of it. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no, it's okay. I just never asked the question. What was the question?
So we have a couple people who probably working, didn't see the invite to the breakout room.
I think Crystal can manually move people, right?
They're going right now.
Jared, you see Christian, he's here.
I was wondering if that was Christian, like
That's
the Christian I don't know.
Yeah.
Hi,
That's
Christian. Oh, there's Daniela from DNS
Where?
right here. She's coming in.
Hi, Daniela.
Sorry, I'm late.
Anya couldn't make it. She told me she could.
Oh, sweet. Nice. That in society. Good to see
Yeah.
you.
Do you want to move to a breakout, Daniela?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, okay. Must have just come in. Yeah. So I guess Crystal will
Okay.
assign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, since some people fell off, the numbers in each group might be a little wonky.
Yeah,
Sorry.
people jammed as soon as I said breakout rooms.
Yeah.
I know. It was like, I'm out.
That's okay.
Breakout, burnout.
Yeah, I feel
Probably.
Or shyness or whatever it is, or
Yeah.
introversion.
I remember one time we had a client, it was like literally like 500 people in the workshop, and we put everybody in the breakout rooms. And I heard this one lady, she was off mute, and she says, I don't know how they're gonna throw all these people in breakout rooms. I don't know what they doing. And I was like, ma'am, you're off mute. She was pissed.
That
That's
is
so
so
funny.
funny.
Yeah, how many breakout rooms was that? It's like 50 breakout rooms? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, they had a serious Zoom subscription. Yeah.
right, hardcore. That's some subscription for
All
sure.
right. Yeah. Hey, Crystal, good to see you.
Hi,
Yeah, Crystal, thanks so much.
of course.
Yeah. Tell me your dog's name again.
Daya.
Daya. Yeah, like from Game of Thrones, but
Yeah.
yes, yes. All right. I'm writing this down.
Yeah, she's behind me on the bed sleeping.
You can see
What a
her
life.
ears. It's really cute.
What a life. Yeah, she's a black German Shepherd. Let's see.
She's big.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Hi, baby.
Yeah, she's giant.
how much does she weigh?
And she's like only like 70.
Only.
Yeah. Her closest dog friends are two giant Cane Corso Mastiffs, so
Mm.
she's
I
little
think really
compared to
big.
that. They're like 115 or something.
Yeah, mastiffs are huge.
Yeah.
They're
Do you
like
see
bigger than
them?
a
Do you go to the
small
same dog park? Is
Huh?
that where you-
No, they're family friends. I played soccer with her daughter growing up since we were like 6. So yeah, they ended up getting 2 brothers. And so her eldest daughter took one of them and then she kept the other one. And then, so yeah, so it's those 2 mastiffs. And then she has another XL bully that they hang around with too. And so it's a large dog family.
Hmm.
How long did you say we were leaving them in breakout rooms for?
20 minutes.
Okay, so until 20?
It was a little bit before that, like maybe like 18 or something.
Okay, sounds good. Just so I could keep an eye on time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go grab some food. I made some homemade biscuits yesterday, so
Mm.
yeah, I'm gonna go grab that. I'll be back around what time again?
18 after.
18. Okay, I'll be back.
I love how everything came together, like how I think we were really reinforcing each other. I thought that was amazing because, it's like we just had little bullets and we didn't know everything each other were going to say. And then like all these themes kept coming up. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was a nice flow. For sure. Man, but that question, like, can this work get done if only a few people? Like, girl. Your heart just breaks. Like, yeah, we know.
I know. I know exactly. Is it worth continuing? Yeah, probably, but like,
I know, but that's always the question.
And it's also always a moment we work with the client where you see people's heartbreak
mm.
in the work, and then they get disinterested in the process, and that's always hard to see.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree, Angela. I think that there were some moments that we kind of reinforced each other's points and, or use similar language. I thought that was really, really good to see.
Yeah, the transitions were so smooth. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was.
I totally thought I forgot you were upstairs. I was like, at a certain point, I was like, oh my
It's
God.
your house. That's your couch.
Who's upstairs? Oh yeah, Aisha.
You would know if I was at mine.
Oh, yeah. Them kids.
Them kids.
Them kids. That's funny.
I'm so jealous. And D, you're gonna get them in a few days.
Oh, I'm so excited to
Well,
have them.
Angela, if you wanted them, girl, I could have been dropped them off. We could split custody. You want to do
True.
50-50?
I know, I'm like, I've never heard anybody, excited that they weren't getting somebody else's kid. Like,
They're very, very close.
how old are they? How old are they?
2 and 6.
Oh, they're itty bitty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. They are.
They're great.
But yeah,
I know. I raised, I mean, Tara, you and I both, we've raised kids. It's like, I know it's really hard in moments, but like, they're such great kids.
No, I love when I was thinking about because I have a million pictures of my son when he's little and squishy, and I miss that,
Mhm.
It is what it is. They do have to grow. We all
Mhm.
grow.
I love when Angela, the oldest one, Ave, where she just like, oh, she'll look when you play in your hair. It's so sweet.
Avi, like, I don't think it was the last time we were here, it was maybe the time before. Oh wait, we
wait, he
lost her.
left.
I realized it
Um,
was, I was trying to figure out. It's like
If
somebody's,
when was that, Aisha, when like that first time Ave sort of was laying across D and playing with her hair? Do you remember that? We were on the couch and I think I had like told Ave she could, like, oh yeah, Ave, you can stay up, and you two were like, what? And then she kind of was laying across D and playing with her hair. I
don't
I was
remember
saying,
that.
do you remember that time when D when the kids were supposed to go to bed and I was like, oh, Ave, you could just stay up, and you both were like, what? And then Ave was like laying in your lap and playing with your hair, and I was like, well, this seems worth it.
It was like a massage, a scalp massage. It was very nice.
oh, it
But
was a
also
scalp.
just the like moment of like her
intimacy.
giving, like her developing that comfort with you was just
Yes.
so special.
Is it the old place? I was in the corner, right? On the
Oh
couch.
yeah, it was the old
The
place.
old place.
Yeah.
Mhm. I remember. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
very soothing.
Well, Ave brought all of her artwork home from school from over the year, and it's been fascinating to see different iterations of family that she's drawn since she's been here, and it has shifted. And so the most recent iteration, the photo or the picture she drew is entitled Campo Turinc, which is our neighborhood. And it's buildings, and it's Dee, me, her sister Nova, and her walking the streets of her neighborhood. And she said that's her family. And so,
Mm.
it didn't start off that way, but we've had some weird combinations. Also,
Some random brothers thrown in there.
random brothers. But yeah, I mean, it's been a really beautiful year that I feel like I need some downtime to really reflect on.
Yeah. It was so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mi familia. You have to measure them before they leave against on that wall. Take their heights again. So
Because
okay.
come September, it'll be totally different.
Yeah.
Damn, right. Because is Soraya short or is Ave tall?
Ave's tall. Ave's really tall for her age.
They're both pretty tall, huh?
They're both big for their age.
Mhm.
I didn't get that from me. Nova's been counting, which is sweet. She knows some colors. So that's the latest. 1, 2, dois.
Does she count in Portuguese or
Both.
English? Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so wild. It cracks me up. She is off the chain and so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Both.
I met up with them for this concert this weekend, and there were just like, there's this pack of slightly of older kids running around this like kind of forest grove. And Nova wanted to go so badly. And it was just like this flash, you could just see, it's just this like, oh God, in another like year and a half, 2 years, she'll be that old, which she's
Oh,
obviously not, but
Oh.
so cute.
yeah.
And Tara, your son, he's in culinary school, right?
Yeah, he is. He's at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park. He's finishing up his, well, so they do 9 semesters, 3 years. So he's actually finishing his junior year. So he graduates
Wow.
next spring. I mean, he started in 2022, but he'll be done next spring.
Wow.
And so this semester he is working at so there's a bunch of restaurants on campus that are like real, people go from the town, or, and everything. So he's now working in one of the restaurants. So comes out because I just want to, I remember when we visited the school before he went there, and we had dinner at one of the restaurants, and the students came and served, and it was just so wonderful to see. And so now that's him, so I'm hoping.
Wow.
Oh my
But
God, that's so incredible. In Hyde Park in Chicago?
Hyde Park, New York.
Hyde Park,
It's
New
like
York.
it's about 2 hours outside of the city.
Yeah.
But he's loving it. I mean, when I talk to him, he's just so happy. And it feels really good, I mean, we're in the final stretch. Like, tuition has been breaking me down, but but it's the final stretch, really. And I just, every time just need, always check in, like, how you doing? Like, how is he's like, I'm good, Mom. He's like, he's doing what he's always wanted to do. Yeah. I mean, he's been wanting to be a chef since he was probably about 7.
Wow.
He's been in the kitchen since he was about 3 or 4. He used to make himself little sandwiches. And he'd make a little plate, like carrots and strawberries in a sandwich. I'd be like, okay.
Presentation.
Yeah, it was all like, he had his little presentation. He was all balanced, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know what he's gonna do afterwards. I don't think he does either, but I told him, I was like, you have to really start thinking about it because it goes fast.
What's your favorite meal of his?
Oh, geez. That's a tough one because I didn't have him when he was in high school. He lived with his dad. So I missed out on a lot of meals. But I mean, he used to cook in middle school. And one time he like butterflied a whole chicken and roasted in a cast iron with potatoes and vegetables. And that was really good. But when he's visited me in France, like, am I still answering her question? When he's made duck breast and
Whoa,
he
in
also made,
middle school?
this was when when he made the duck breast, he was in high school. He was visiting me in
Okay.
Paris.
But
I mean,
still,
yeah. He makes a really good cheesecake. He makes really good cookies. He really knows how to season a steak. Well, but then I just saw, when I saw him at Christmas, we were at my besties and he made a ramen with just like a chicken breast, and it was like the most perfectly cooked chicken breast ever. He made homemade bagels. I'm like, oh man, he made bagels.
Yeah. Having chefs in the family is really top tier.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
I tell
like
him all the time.
top
Like,
tier.
let me tell you, honey. I tell them, like, ladies are gonna love you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I have my uncle, yeah. I was saying my uncle and his son are chefs. My little cousin is also going through a culinary school in North Carolina. So
Where in culinary school is your cousin?
I don't know the exact place,
Okay.
but yeah, but that's so nice.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Well, he doesn't talk. No, he loves the service. He does it if he feels like it's an act of service. And but he doesn't necessarily want to go into like fine dining. He doesn't want to do that whole thing. And so the semester he had a semester where he was on externship. They have to do a semester where they go out into the world, and he actually worked for a nonprofit that makes medically specialized meals for people with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and diabetes. Like, and it's it's like high volume production. They deliver like I don't know, it's like 6,000 to 9,000 meals a day. And he was this was in DC. It's a place called Food and Friends DC, and he was working under two other Black male chefs. The executive chef is a Black man from DC, and then this other guy. And he was in the community, like he was, and it was just, I was surprised by the choice. Like I didn't expect the choice. He's kind of introverted. I don't ever always know what he's really thinking about. He's fine, but he just is a little bit quieter and all that. So, and he loved it. So I don't know. He may go back to that.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
The breakout rooms are gonna close soon, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
So Angela, are you facilitating this?
Yeah, I can do that.
Am I sharing the PowerPoint again?
Yeah, share that one slide so everybody remembers what the questions are.
Okay. Everyone should be back in 5 seconds.
Yeah, everybody's still talking. Welcome back, everybody. Woo! I have a feeling you guys were still talking when we stopped that. So we're going to have each group report back. Room 1 was Alice Perry, Daniela Franco, and Megan Korn. So do one of you want to share what some of the top things that you talked about were?
Sure, I can share, and then my group promised to jump in if I didn't accurately capture everything. Good afternoon, everyone. We had an opportunity to talk about kind of our agency's different journeys within the DEI the DEI space that we're in. And I think when we talked about what we'd like to see DEI look like in the future, I think we're hoping, to see our DEI efforts continue despite leadership changes. I think that's one of the things that some of us were struggling with, is what happens when bosses change or high up leadership changes. How do you keep the work going? So we talked a little bit about that. We talked about not being afraid to have the conversation. So in some spaces, we need to even just start bringing people to the table. And how do we accomplish that and have people even just start having these conversations? We talked about making sure that the efforts are fully funded and resourced, and that's been somewhat of a barrier. And then we talked about how do we become effective practitioners in this space? So how do we ourselves educate ourselves? How do we educate committees or the people doing the work, and ensuring that we're appropriately educated? And y'all, did I miss anything?
All right, good job, Megan. That was awesome. Room 2 is Charlie Best, Mariah Corder, Sandra Womack, Taishi Duchella, and Tonga Leslie. Who wants to report back?
Thank you. I'm Sandra Womack. I was part of the
Okay.
group. And I would appreciate if my group, if there's anything I'm missing, to feel free to chime in and provide your insight. Our discussion was pretty deep, and a lot of the things that we kind of focused on was I think there was an agreement that DEI work has become very frustrating, especially during some heightened political and global impacts. There is also a shared desire for all of us to have a buy-in from the agency when there is a stance that is happening at the global level, that there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement that we are making a decision around things such as, even with border and immigration and policing and genocide and those hard and difficult issues that sometimes it does seep into our day-to-day work within our organization. So that was really imperative that we kind of talked about that. Also that, oftentimes even with DEI work, it could be very limiting in the way that we even have access to be out there to take a stand. So how our agency would view that if we were to do that, and if we had permission to do that, what would that look like? We also kind of talked about having courageous conversations. Sometimes it could be very challenging depending on your coworkers and their experiences and their perspective and ideology on that matter. And we have to talk about race and racial reconciliation. That's so important because people of color, in a lot of ways, it's the truth. We all feel unsafe, even though our coworkers that may identify as white privilege may feel in a certain way. I think the other thing too that we talked about was really measuring it in a way that we have something significant that we are able to translate the DEI work in a way that we can measure it. And I think, I forgot your name. He was a part, Tongo? Okay. Tonga, can you expand on what you were saying the last 30 seconds?
Oh, we talked a little bit about power and how that plays into it, and to what extent are leaders really thinking about how they can give away their platforms and shift their power to people, so it's not just representation within the organization or the company, but actually growing power and influence so people can shape their own destiny and vision for what's going on.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, group. That was amazing, really, really thought-provoking. Group 3, Esther Stiles, Kendra Ketch, Kimberly Emery, Lorraine Lyles, and Stephanie Campos, who, sorry, that was his Portuguese pronunciation. I mean, Campos, who wants to share back for you?
I think it's going to be me. It doesn't have to be
great.
me. We didn't actually take a vote, but if anybody in my group wants to jump in, please feel free. But we began by talking about some of us have moved from working in one sector to different sectors in our career, and how we have been at times really underwhelmed by how little DEI is understood from sector to sector. And that we really going forward would hope that it would become more commonly understood across our institutions. And I think that gets to, we talked a little bit about answering the why question. Why should our institution be invested in this kind of work? And what does it actually mean for the organization? Talked a little about that. We talked a little bit about the word diversity meaning more than just anti-white. Diversity is bigger than that, and that maybe we need some language to embrace that. even though we do realize that the power is still largely held in that group. No question about that. But and someone on our team suggested that they had heard the term JEDI, justice, equity, diversion, and inclusion, which I think might reflect better the intention of a lot of our institutional efforts with DEI. We also talked a little bit about how it would be helpful for there to be a greater understanding that DEI is not, as the presentation pointed out, it's not a place where we arrive. It's not a destination. It's more of a journey. And it's constantly ongoing, and it needs to continue to adapt as the culture does, adapt with it. But we also talked a little bit about how it's, DEI is not new work. It has a long and rich history, and that sometimes maybe tapping into that and helping people become aware of that would help answer the why question about, why is this important? Because there are some deep roots for DEI in places that have largely not been lifted up, and maybe doing that might help us to better understand how this work creates better outcomes for our organizations in terms of what it is we actually do and what our missions are in the different sectors of our workplaces. And also, somebody had mentioned that being part of their DEI team had helped them feel comfortable staying where they were in terms of their job, and that they didn't before then really feel like they could bring that part of themselves to their job. And that was kind of a hopeful point in our conversation, that hopefully that's an outcome of DEI that allows future generations to feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. That has not largely been true for people that are of a certain age. We kind of compartmentalize our lives a little bit differently. Was more of the norm, but I'm hoping that changes as we begin to do some of this work with younger generations coming into the workforce. Did I miss anything, guys, on my team?
Wow, it's a really beautiful summary. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, room 4 was a little smaller. AJ Lawrence and Janina Ferrara.
Hey guys, how are you?
Great.
So yeah, we had a small little group, and we just kind of talked, kind of gave a little history of what we both had going on in our departments. I from a probation department, and my counterpart from the health services, I believe she said. And it's more about, for us here, trying to formulate. We're trying to move forward. Our department was a little stagnant. We started during COVID, like just about everybody else, I guess. Had some traction. Didn't really have a lot of buy-in from the department, but we were still plugging away, and kind of just got stagnant on it. And so now we're trying to pick up the pieces and try to see if we can build something much stronger than what we had from when we started, and looking for help, really. And so one of my assistant chiefs got us in this, and we have a couple meetings set up, and we're going to try to see if we can formulate a plan to move forward for the next, 100 years maybe, or something like that. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Room 5, Amy Matchett Wagner, Fran Cook Mayhood, Nina Everts, and Sean Hill.
Hi, this is Fran. I think I'm reporting out on our group. One,
Wonderful.
Nina, Amy, and Sean were amazing to work with. They were just great. And we actually started out discussing how to measure success. I think because actually before we started discussing that, we kind of introduced ourselves and the service that we were in and why we were here today. And then it evolved into this measurement of success and trying to understand, what does a mixed method approach mean? And we had somebody on our team who could really help with that. Thank you, Sean. And Sean discussed that it's actually a combination of qualitative and quantitative, and that there's value in both of these, but the mixed method uses the results from each methodology, qualitative and quantitative, and interprets them together. And so you've got this data set that's supported, say, with qualitative data, which makes it stronger. And we thought that this was a really good way to measure DEI success, this mixed method. And then we also said that researchers should provide a report for the average person, one that you can understand, because sometimes we get this report from researchers who are studying our programs and whatnot, and it's like, I don't know what this means. So we all had to chuckle about that, but we really thought that the mixed method approach would be a real good way to measure DEI success. And then we kind of shifted to DEI in the future. And it turns out all of us work for government agencies. And so some of our work is driven by politics and who's in charge and who's voted in and who's voted out. And that's difficult, because we wonder, how is this going to impact me? How's it going to impact our system? We recognize that the practice is important, being seen is important, seeing others is important. And so we kind of came down to a concept that you all presented, the North Star concept, that you've got this individual practice, and that's going to always be connected to knowing who you are and who you are serving. And if you can stay with that North Star concept, that would be helpful. But then we had another voice that said, I know that we're told conflict is not personal, it's about ideas. But for me, it's always personal. You know, I struggle with separating ideas from the personal. And we all acknowledge that there's absolutely some truth to that. You know, when we're taking the high road, it's about the ideas. But when we're living our normal lives, sometimes it's personal too, and that's difficulty. And so what we left with was an idea that we were going to serve with authenticity and integrity.
Thank you. Really beautiful. Room 6, Afara, Leyland, Anna Munoz, Christian. I don't know if you actually were in the group. F. Douglas Brown and Mynisha White.
Hi, everyone. I'm the speaker for the group, representing Mynisha from Portland, or Mynisha from the Bay, excuse me. Anna from Portland, and Afara was there with us in LA. We just kind of riffed off one another, and then we kind of looked at some commonalities that we looked at, that we thought all our journeys were in different phases, and all our spaces were different. I'm at a school. We had a cultural organization. We had a legal organization. And all of us, we were, like I said, at different phases. Some of us were norming things or moving away from one in transition, and some of us were actually in the storm, just trying to figure it out and look for all different ways. But one of the ways that we saw commonality was this idea of generational gaps. And I think it was D'Angela who mentioned the MCMs versus like the elders of the groups. And we saw that there was this conflict in all our organizations or schools that really limited both respect and opportunities for grace. Respect and knowing that, you know, we come from organizations, or like, again, my case is school, that has strong values that have been passed down from ancestor to elder to even now to youth. And sometimes there's a lack of respect of having to have conversations about those and why the change is important. And then there's important to have grace when people make those mistakes in those spaces or in those timelines. And we were talking about like ways we have done that and thinking about it. Another commonality we saw that it was important, though, in any of those ways, is to give folks opportunity to understand the self and to like it was mentioned, to understand the individual. And then I was just going to add what you all had said about the North Star for your organization to do that, but to really kind of center on the self and to allow people to have those conversations was important. I hope I represented my group well. If anybody wants to add anything, please do. But thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you. Beautiful. Room 7, Yvonne Gillen, Jessica Jenkins, and Marty Santos.
Hi, everybody. I'll report out for our group. This is Jessica. Interestingly, we had reps from a nonprofit legal services organization, me, and then also from academia and from government. So we had different kinds of institutions we work with, but definitely saw some commonalities. We mostly addressed the what would you like to see DEI become? Because full disclosure, we forgot what the second question was. And when it popped up on our screens, we all missed it. Anyway, but we had a really good, interesting conversation around that. We talked about Brene Brown's concept of transactional versus transformative, like change and leadership, and thought of different examples of the way we've seen that shown up in spaces we've worked in. We talked a lot about how we appreciated the idea in the presentation earlier about the importance of individual, like interpersonal change along with systemic change, and that you really need both to like advance like cultural change. And that you need the skills building and interpersonal change, intrapersonal, right? Along with leadership, supporting people with like institutional structure. And we talked about the importance of people feeling safe, and that leadership, the importance of leadership really modeling and conveying messages around safety so that people can feel vulnerable and not defensive. Can feel space to feel safety and space to feel vulnerable and be open. And then we talked about the importance of really just seeking to understand other people's perspectives and not only seeking to be understood ourselves.
Thank you. Again, just so much rich information from all of you. Thank you so much. Last room is Alicia Thompson, Aubrey Schlappman, and Lachey.
Good day, everyone. My name is Alicia Thompson. I had the pleasure of being in the group with Miss Lachey and Miss Aubrey, all from the West Coast. So we really had this organic theme around honest dialogue and the discussion of coming from being your true self and being able to bring all your biases to the table, being able to bring all your diversified thoughts, and really staying in a framework of honesty, of understanding who you are as a person as you bring this information to this collective effort, and instituting change through that means. Being uncomfortable, but addressing the situation or addressing issues as they arise and not waiting to be forced. So we discussed how that happens most often in professional and personal spaces, mostly, is that we're forced into change. So once you're at the table and you have all these different ideas and you understand what's going on, then you can have the discussion, and then you can move realistically forward in making and instituting the change. We also discussed about bringing unique perspectives to the table. So it didn't matter whether you were white, Black, female, male, came from the LGBTI community, that everyone felt empowered to be themselves, to be honest about the discussion, and allow, again, this change to happen and occur. We didn't get to how we would like to see the success measured, but I believe the quality in discussion and being honest is almost like a qualitative design for change and moving forward in DEI efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. What an amazing conversation. I don't know. We have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if anybody else has a few more questions. We have like 3 or 4 more minutes if anybody wants to or make a comment about how beautiful that tapestry of comments was? Does anybody want to share any thoughts? Okay, well, I'm gonna pass to Angela, who's gonna, Crystal, I don't know, Crystal, if you could go back to the presentation, because we have a few next steps on a slide, and then we're gonna close with some beautiful information about Les Maisons Baldwin.
Yeah, those responses were great. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate all the thought that you put into those responses. A couple of things here is we will be sending out the recording. I know Angela put that in the chat box earlier, but you all will get this information. We will set up a follow-up call for those interested in this approach to DEI. So we'll dive deeper and, you know, get in the weeds a little bit more. I forgot to put this on here, but also Voice and Vision provides coaching for women identified folks and queer folks. And so we are definitely taking in folks to be a part of the coaching program. Currently, a lot of the clients are people who are in DEI, who are transitioning, who still want to do the work, but do it differently. And then we're having a lot of queer folks who are looking to be able to share their identities in ways that are affirming to them. And so we are open for women identified queer folks. And with that said, what better way to end this off? First, I'm sorry, thank you, Ceres. First of all, they have been an awesome partner in all this. I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of months in Lisbon, hanging out. And so thank you so much, Angela, Aisha, and Crystal. And so Tara, I'm passing to you, La Maison Baldwin, and she's going to share something kind of cool with you all. Thank you all for being here.
Sure, yeah. So don't start it quite yet, but I just wanted to say, you know, there's probably no greater North Star when it comes to DEI than James Baldwin himself. And, you know, he gave us the language years ago for this work when we didn't know that he was giving it to us. And this year happens to be, would have marked his centennial. And so we are planning, and it's French lesson, it's La Maison Baldwin, because maison is feminine, whatever that means. But anyway, so in September, just to commemorate his centennial, we're having a festival here in Paris. And last year we had this phenomenal writers workshop where 20 plus writers came here, and we just celebrated him and celebrated our humanity and our vulnerability. And we had a filmmaker with us. So he put together a short film. It's like 5 minutes to kind of hype the centennial that was coming, but also to just immerse us in James Baldwin and everything that he has gifted us as a prophet and as a uncle and as a, you know, a sage and a seer. So I wanted to share that with you, and then just share some information about the centennial in case you're interested. And we have a discount code for you as well. So, so now, Crystal, you can move on to the film. I think it must be missing sound, I think. Yeah, it's missing sound.
James Baldwin is not
Oh, there we go.
Distant intellectual ancestor. He is a soulmate. He's like John Coltrane and John Chekhov. He's somebody that I sleep with, I dream about. He's somebody who shapes at a fundamental level who I am. It's like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. I teach him every year. I read him intensely.
What I was saying at the beginning of this whole session, it's about uncovering what we already know. And it's also knowledge of self. Because in the first clip, he said, "I am a fool to believe that there's somewhere I can go where I'm not carrying myself." Yes. And so, like,
anytime I have a chance to bear witness to his genius, his courage, his vision, his unbelievable charisma, personality, and most importantly, his love, I jump at.
To be born in Harlem against the backdrop of the Great Migration, Baldwin was witness to the pride and possibility of Black beauty and success in all its forms. I was reminded of my own father, another Jimmy from Harlem.
On a time, more accurate way, I became, during my 14th year, for the first time in my life, afraid. Afraid of the evil within me and afraid of the evil without. What I saw around me that summer of Harlem was what I had always seen. Nothing had changed, but now without any warning.
boy, 12 and ready to use a gun, an animal holds the gun to deer's face, breathes like he forgot he was a boy. He forgot childhood had more colors than red, points the gun at what seems to be the last deer alive on Black Wall Street, not knowing he too is someone's son, someone's father, someone's provider, who freezes and stares into the barrel, shaking, hoping this child will show him some kind of mercy in this world. Child wanted his father to be proud.
In the eyes of heaven or in the eyes of earth, it's over. I've dealt with you a very long time. Now you're gonna deal with me.
What Jimmy was angry. He was constant. He was angry at injustice, at ignorance, at exploitation, at stupidity, at vulgarity. Yes, he was angry.
While my stomach is literally upside down, or perhaps gravity ceased to exist for a moment in there, either way, haven't I digested these butterflies yet? This is an execution of self. This is exorcism. Spilled demons on stage, written with precision to get surgical as I cut deep and bleed as your sacrificial lamb. It's never just a performance.
Look at the world, the Christian world. They know what to do with what they made of the world. They don't know what to do with the choices they made. I don't care what church you go to.
Jimmy wouldn't let people off the hook, and some people are bothered by that.
You always told me it takes time. It's taking my father's time, my mother's time. How much time do you want for your progress?
I have yet seen the video because I refuse to. There are many ways to die, many more to live. They say, you are dust, and dust you shall return. No, you belong to us, to the wretched of the earth. Dust is what I want to make with those on your neck.
The truth teller in a truth-denying civilization.
When the police and ambulance left, you didn't make it to the headlines. Hands like my grandfather's, mouth like my mama's, trigger fingers, they wrote you off as symptomatic. Not of systems, but of blacklist.
Anytime we have that kind of courage, that I call funk, you're gonna get sanitized, you're gonna get sterilized. That's what they try to do with Baldwin. So he's a genius of Harlem, he's the son of Harlem. He's a genius and son of Black people, but he was always international. That's the kind of impact.
Crystal, do you want to go one more slide?
Yeah, so thank you, Crystal. I know it's so hard to share a video over Zoom because it's you know, the bandwidth and all that, but we'll make sure you get the deck so you can watch it again because there's music and everything that didn't quite come through. But so yeah, so we are having this festival. It is if you go to our website, there is just all of the programming, keynote speakers, panels. We're having a welcome reception in partnership with the U.S. Embassy here in Paris. We're going to be having a gala event. We're doing a writer's workshop. There's a whole lot of things that'll be happening that week. So we wanted to make sure to offer the opportunity for you to check us out and check it out. And even if you're a writer as well, you know, and have some interest with respect to that, we certainly welcome you. But just also, I mean, whatever spaces you're in, you know, I invite you to celebrate James Baldwin, particularly as you are grounded in DEI work, because he gives us so much substance to have those difficult conversations and to be courageous and to be vulnerable and to be human and to be intersectional in how we engage in this work. So I'll end there. And thank you for including me, Aisha, Angela, and Dee. I really appreciated being a part of this process.
You tell them about the DEI feature code?
Oh yeah, so there's a code. So there's we're doing an early bird registration right now. We're offering you the DEI Future 2024 discount code. It's like $150 discount on the registration. So check us out, because there's a lot of different components to the registration for the festival. And it's post-Olympics. His birthday is August 2nd, which is right in the middle of the Olympics. So that's why we're doing it in September. But Paris is still pretty lovely in the fall. So
Sweet. Thank you, Tara.
Sure.
And Aisha plopped something in the chat box. I'll read it out loud for those interested in ongoing support around getting DEI work started, or for those feeling stuck in their efforts. Ceres and Voice and Vision have co-developed a certificate program where Ceres will help you develop measurements, and Voice and Vision will provide technical assistance and implementation. And I will stop there and pass it to Angela or Aisha if you have anything you want to add.
I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoyed everybody's input. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
And I'll just say I'm so heartened by the turnout, and I think it's promising to see folks standing strong in their positions and their values around this work. This work has a long history, and I think it'll have a long future. And so thank you all very much for joining us.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a great, beautiful day.
Thank you.